We are proud to sponsor this book talk with former Senator Joe Manchin in partnership with the Schwarzenegger Institute at the USC Price School. At the center, we are committed to a civil discourse where we respect each other and we respect the truth. Any disruption that violates that standard is unacceptable. And anyone who engages in that kind of disruption will be asked to leave, and to help them on their way out, we will happily provide an escort from the Department of Public Safety. This event is part of our Jeff and Sue White Dialogue series at the Center, and I want to thank them both for making this session possible. The Senator doesn't know this, although I hinted at it when we met a while ago, but I met his uncle, A. James Manchin, who was then West Virginia's Secretary of State, on a visit to Charleston 45 years ago with Ted Kennedy. Senator Manchin, you write in your book about being 13 years old during the 1960 West Virginia primary, right. And you recount, I froze. Sitting at our modest table eating spaghetti and meatballs was the Kennedy clan with Ted Kennedy talking with Dad and Uncle Jimmy about the presidential race. Your family helped JFK win that critical primary. Yep. I can assure you that Ted Kennedy loved the spaghetti and meatballs, and that had you served in the Senate together, he would have worked like hell to find a way to work with you. Years later, when I met him, Secretary of State Manchin was an unforgettable political presence. So in a different way is Senator Joe Manchin. Served as both the governor of West Virginia, senator for West Virginia, in the years from 2005 to 2025. He was a pivotal figure in a closely divided Senate during the Biden administration. And he has authored a revealing and fascinating and personal, I mean, you really will want to read this when you start to read it, memoir about his entire public career and his life, entitled Dead Center, in Defense of Common Sense. He was the last Democrat to hold any major office in West Virginia, once one of the most reliable Democratic states. So I'm going to start with that. Senator, in the book, you write about your decision near the end of your Senate career to become an independent. Quote, "For too long, my loyalty to the Democratic Party had been driven by a deep connection to distant ideals, tethered to the nostalgia of a time when public service was noble and the hope and optimism that resonated through the Kennedy years still felt possible." You add then, "Walking away from the Democratic label wasn't easy for me." What happened?
Well, I think, let me give you a little bit of background where I come from so it gives you a better idea. I come from a little coal mining town in Appalachia called Farmington, West Virginia. Maybe 500 people on the best of days, probably in the 350 to 400 range. And I was raised in a family that was an ethnic family. My father's side was from Italy, and my mother's side was from Czechoslovakia. So they came over in the early 1900s, my great-grandparents, and, you know, we were living the American dream, if you would. And the only thing I ever heard growing up, you have to give something back. You have to be involved. You have to be sympathetic, you know. So I was always taught that your words have meaning and your actions will be held accountable and responsible for. So I know words, and I was always taught, sometimes the words you say will lead into actions that you regret. And you got to be very careful. So that's always been in my mind, and maybe it was pretty common back there. My grandmother was a one-woman social worker back in the early 50s. Being a very young kid, I used to notice that we had 20 grandkids, all of us lived very close together, and we had to clean the basement of her house and keep it whitewashed and nice, and she had a little shower down there in the bed. Anybody that needed a place to stay, Mama Kay took care of, but she had rules. You couldn't drink, you couldn't cuss, and you had to work. So I grew up knowing there was rules. I watched them. So now I'm setting the stage for now I go through this political career of mine. I was 35 years old before I got involved in politics. My wife, Gail, we had our daughter, Heather, and she has two siblings, Joseph and Brooke. But one day I was with my father in a store. We worked together, and a person came in who had been a representative for a long time, for state representative, and told my dad, said, "Hey, Johnny, remember all those favors I've done for you?" And I'm thinking, I've been working with my dad for a long time. I never heard him ask anybody for a favor. he'd ask somebody in the political arena, can you help so-and-so? She might be having problems with this. Or John or Jimmy over here might be having problems. And I'm thinking, only thing you ever asked for, do your job. Just do your job. He walked out and I said, Dad, I'm going to run against that guy. That's ridiculous. That guy's not in it for public service. That's self-service. It's all about him. I'm 35 now. A lot of people have aspirations to be in very, very young. I didn't. I watched it from afar, but I didn't want to go in that direction. So we ran and I won. And every time I got involved in a political office, I said, okay, I'm one of 100 as a House of Delegate member. If I ran for state senate, I'd be one of 34. In a very simplistic view of things, I thought I could help 3 times as many people. One of 34, got to be 3 times more powerful. Maybe I can help more. Then if I became governor, I'd be 1 to 1. I could really do some stuff. I always thought, where can I get myself in a position to do more public service? I never thought that it should be self-service or this or that. Just never ever into my mind. Got defeated in 1996 in the primary. And I'll never forget sitting there that night and I could tell the numbers were wrong. We were going to get defeated. My son sitting there with me and I told my son, I said, Joseph, I said, hey, we're going to lose this race. We've won a lot of races. We're going to lose this one. And I said, now 2 things can happen. A lot of people blame everybody else for when they lose. You ever hear politicians say, well, so-and-so didn't do this and that so-and-so didn't. Now here, I'm sitting with the master right here, okay? He's made more people in the political arena and he's seen the good and the bad and the ugly. But the bottom line was, I said, we're going to lose this one. I said, we can do 1 or 2 things. We can show a little class or we can show your, you know what. And he says, he's crying. I said, no, honey, it was my fault. I didn't communicate well enough. My message wasn't clear. I didn't communicate. And there's an old saying in politics. It's in life, really, gang. If you know there's something coming up and you're in a tussle or whatever, you better tell your story first, because if not, someone's going to tell one on you. And if they tell their story before you've been able to identify yourself, you're playing defense all the way. You usually be behind the 8 ball and it'll be a miracle if you win. I learned it the hard way. They said some things and got me off my game, and I knew it was all false, but I thought, well, people have to have truth in advertising. They can't tell lies. They got to tell the truth, Bob. Well, they didn't. But it got me to the point where I was flustered on that and I wasn't getting my message across. So Labor went against me. It was in a Democratic primary and Labor went against me. And I was raised in Labor families and Labor people all my life. I'm thinking, what happened? So I said, well, I walked away. I said, I'm not going to run anymore. I'm done. Same group that defeated me came back later because their candidate that they defeated me with got beat, because I knew that the person that defeated me was way too far to the left for my little state. Good people, but just too far over here. So they came back and says, we want you to run again. I said, guys, they said, we made a mistake. I said, you didn't make a mistake. I made a mistake. So we got going again. I said, I'll do it one more time. So I ran for Secretary of State. And I started a program called SHARES, Saving History and Reaching Every Student. Now I'm thinking, what am I going to do as Secretary of State? I said, you do corporations, you do registrations, you're overseeing the elections in your state. But I said, we've got 17-year-olds that didn't know they could vote. They could vote in the primary being 17 as long as they turned 18 on election day or before. So if the election's on November 4th or the 7th, and let's say right on the election day itself, that's your birthday, you could have voted in the primary at 17 years of age. Nobody knew that. So I went around the whole state to every school, and we started basically that we call the Jennings Randolph Award. Because Jennings Randolph, a senator from my state, was the one that got the 18-year-old to vote. And he started this. Everyone thinks all it just came about. Well, Bob, you remember, it came about in the Vietnam War. Yeah. But Jennings Randolph had been promoting this since World War II. If you're old enough to fight and old enough to die, you should be old enough to vote. That was his, and he'd been doing that for 20 years. And it wasn't until the 70s they finally passed it. So we called it the Jennings Randolph Award. We had every school competing who got the award. They got 100% of every 17-year-old that was going to turn 18 registered. They won the award. I says, I can't teach the old dogs tricks, new tricks, but I can teach the young pups tricks that'll take the old And we got more registration, more people show up to vote because the children, their grandchildren and children said, let's go vote. I want to go vote. Take me to go vote, Dad. And they were taking their parents back to vote again. That's just how it happened. But then that's all changed. Then you find yourself at the pinnacle of power. How could a kid coming from this little coal mining community be sitting side by side with the President of the United States in the Oval Office, and the President grabs your arm and says, Joe, your country needs you. They're asking you, they want you to vote for something, okay? Well, that's fine. That's overwhelming, okay? And it's just so surreal. Here you are in this surrounding, the most powerful country in the world, the most powerful economy, the most powerful military, and the most powerful person sitting in the most powerful office. And they're asking you for something, and you're going to have to say in a nice way, I don't think that's going to work. And I'm trying to think, what in the world do I say? So I went like this. I said, Mr. President, the country needs you too. It needs us both. And he said, Joe, I got to have this. I really have to have this. I said, Mr. President, I got to be honest with you. You and I have been friends for a long time, and I've known a lot of presidents. And I said, in all seriousness, I said, I was raised in the John Kennedy era. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And if you understand the country, the democracy, and we're not even teaching civics anymore, but the democracy we live in is a representative form of democracy. It's an experiment that George Washington said. It's an experiment. No one's ever done it. The people have never governed themselves. Think about it. How would you think, coming from all different walks of life, that we could sit down and treat each other equally and fair and govern ourselves? Didn't think it could be done. And it's still that experiment is being tested harder now than ever. But so I'm thinking, Mr. President, you pass this bill, you're going to change the psychic of the nation to how much more can my country do for me? And I said, sir, I'm so sorry. You have to be respectful of the office, respectful of the whole process. Whoever the president is, that's your president. Whether you like him or not, whether you voted for him or not, you want to do everything you can to make your president and your government successful. The whole world's watching, really, and we all need it to be successful. And now we start tearing each other apart, and we'll get into that later. I'm sure Bob will lead me right into that. But so I had to make some tough decisions. You know how I made them? Can I go home and explain this? If I went back to my little town, could I explain it to them? Could I explain it to the people that I grew up with? Could I explain it to the people that helped raise me? Does it make sense? And I've always said in West Virginia, small little communities, they can shake your hand, look in your eye, and see your soul. That's all they got. They got their gut. They didn't have a whole lot of anything else, but they could tell if you're BSing them or not. They could feel it in your hand. And anyway, so I said, no, I can't do that. And he got very mad at me. He got very mad. And I said, sir, we've been friends. We'll be friends. We'll continue. I just can't. I'm trying everything I can. I can't get there. So you figure where that strength come from. They said, how did you handle the pressure? I said, as long as you are who you are, there's no pressure. It's when you try to change and be something you're not, and you're chasing something because you're here, you're going like this, up this road, trying to get on that superhighway. As long as you are who you are, you're going to be fine. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to feel guilty about it. You have to be sympathetic in how you deliver the news. And I said this, if you can say no with a tear in your eye to your friend, you'll be okay. You'll be okay.
Okay. This book is a wonderful personal book too.
Yeah.
I'm from the story of how you met and married your wife.
Oh, yeah.
To the story of how you wanted to, and it wasn't unrealistic, play in the NFL. And you went to WVU.
I had a scholarship, played as quarterback, played ball, and I thought, boy, here I am off to the races. And then they got my knee tore up in college and lost. I couldn't play. I couldn't pass the physical.
Yeah, and you write, my football dreams were done.
Everything. At one day in the hospital, I woke up. It was all over.
Yeah, and then your family went through some other things that were pretty tough and terrible. How did that affect you?
You grow up fast. Responsibility is thrown on you. I have 3 little kids. I had one little. No, I didn't have. Heather wasn't born. She was born in '69. This happened in '68. We had a mine explosion. And the mine explosions, when they happen, I mean, they're horrific. It's just horrible. The methane gas builds up, and if you don't have good ventilation, you get one spark and it's gone. It's like lighting a powder keg. And my uncle, I had 4 or 5 classmates, my uncle, and I was coming home to help work in the store from school, and it blew up. And when it blew, it just destroyed the whole community. It was devastating. And then a week before that, my dad's furniture store burnt down, and we didn't have insurance. So we lost everything. And we had to start over. So I dropped out of school, and I thought, well, I had to help them rebuild. My parents were devastated because they worked their whole life, and now they had nothing to start over with. And we just all pulled together and just got through it. And it was the community and the town and just good people that believed in you. I'll never forget, they want my dad to declare bankruptcy. And he says, why would I declare bankruptcy? They said, because you have no money and you owe a lot of people. He says, I have the ability to pay him back. I have the desire to pay him back, and I'm going to pay him back. He says, I just don't have anything right now. But so we got some credit from the carpet business. We went in the carpet business. He started paying these people back. Every month we were sending checks to people, trying to pay people off. And this is furniture that burned up. We didn't sell a stick of furniture, but we owed people. But I saw the character of who we are and who we're supposed to be. You fulfill your obligations and commitments. And you just don't fold your tent and say, okay, bankruptcy, here I come. And I'll never forget that. We almost got people paid off. First of all, people says, just give me 50 cents on the dollar. Okay? The creditors were telling my dad, Johnny, you owe me $20,000, just give me 10. We didn't have 10, first of all. And next of all, he says, no. When I bought the furniture, I owed you $20,000. I was going to sell that furniture, pay you, and I made a little bit of profit. That's all gone, but I still owe it to you. So he says, I'll pay you the whole 100%. Once they saw that my dad's commitment to pay the bill off, then they started asking for interest. Now that's when he blew up. He says, you'd have taken 50 cents on the dollar. I'm paying you 100% on the dollar, and you want interest on top of that? No. And that's when he drew a line. It's the fairness in the system, but it's just, but you know what? He knew he was right inside, so we were okay.
Yeah, you were managing the carpet store, but you gave it up to your brother easily.
1989, I tried to go into it. And in 1989, coal's all we had. I had 4 big coal mines around me. But mining coal, you have a lot of what we call waste. They throw it away, and there's still a lot of carbon in it. But it was leaching into the pond, so they had a new thing called fluidized bed. Fluidized bed could almost burn junk coal, but you burned it with limestone. And then the residuals, which is what we call our ash or the waste, had a lot of lime content. We would take that lime waste, backfill into the coal mines to purify the water. So it was a twofold. So we got into that, and we've been doing that for a while.
So you talked about your early career in politics, Secretary of State. You were elected governor in 2004, even as the state was moving away from Democrats. And as I know all too well, even as John Kerry was decisively losing West Virginia. How did you buck that tide?
I'll be honest with you, I never thought having a political identification would change you as a person or identify who you were supposed to be. I just looked for good people, and I thought, and I told my dad, I said, Dad, I'm going to get involved. And I never thought, well, should I be a D or an R? I guess I was a Democrat because my grandfather, after the Great Depression, I'm sure, because my state, they tell me it was all Republican up until 29 in 1930 and started changing with Roosevelt. And just the loyalty that these people, hardworking people, had for him saving their life. And we never looked at it that way. I always thought, I'm fiscally responsible and socially compassionate. And I'm compassionate because I watched my grandparents take care of every human being that needed a place to stay or something to eat. That's all I know. She only said 3 things. Everybody should have a roof over their head, clothes on their back, and food in their stomach. And if they couldn't do it for themselves, she'd do it for them. But then she'd kind of boost them up a little bit, and they'd be on their own. I never saw anybody loafing around the streets of Farmington. I never saw anybody loafing. I saw people that were incapacitated and couldn't work, and the town took care of them. I saw kids that had polio back then, and everything, where everybody chipped in and helped everybody. But as far as someone just looking for a handout, I never saw that. So I'm a product of my environment. So in the political arena, I kept saying, I says, government should be your partner, not your provider. Not in a democracy, not in a capitalist society. You cannot expect government to be your provider. But you better have the moral obligation and to take care of those who can't, because I think you're being tested on that.
So 2004, Republicans are winning the state.
Winning, and they kept saying, there's Joe. They didn't say, there's Joe the Democrat. Hell, I didn't even know who people work for me. I know where the Democrats. I never asked them what party they belonged to. I picked the best I could. I'll never forget. I picked the one guy from Public Service Commission. He was the best lawyer in West Virginia. He beat the state every time he took him to court. The best of the best. And I heard through the grapevine he's going to retire. And I went over and saw him. And I needed a Public Service Commission. I needed a chairman, smart guy. I went over there and we're talking. He says, well, you know, I'm looking to do something now. And now I'm retiring. I would like to get involved in the knowledge I have. I understand the system. I said, you understand the system. You beat everybody in the system. You took everything. He says, I said, I'm going to give something back. I said, okay. And I said, I'm going to use fictitious. I said, Bob, I want you to be my chairman of my Public Service Commission. And he was flattered. He said, oh my God, Joe, that would be, he said, I think I could really help. I said, I know you could. No one knows it better than you. He says, you know I'm a Republican? And I said, does that bother you? Doesn't bother me. You're the best of the best. I want the best. And that's how we did things. We never looked at it from the political, and I had to be politically correct, and someone's going to come after me if I didn't have all D's because the R's are supposed to be the enemy. I never saw the other side as an enemy. I saw it as my friend who had a different idea to fix the same problem I identified. That's all.
Yeah, we'll talk about when you might have gotten a little bit of a challenge because you had a D after your name.
I can tell you the good story about Donald Trump and the D.
Go ahead.
2016, he gets elected. I'm the only let's preface. 2009, I'm governor. They're selling the Greenbrier, which is a tremendous resort in West Virginia. They're going to sell it. They're going to close it first. So I knew this chairman of CSX, the railroad company, owned it. And it's a beautiful and it's just synonymous. And they called me and said, Governor, we're going to close the Greenbrier. And I says, now, Mike, you and I are friends. I said, you and I have known each other for a long time. You close the Greenbrier, which is a marquee to the state of West Virginia that we can't support the Greenbrier, we can't make it work. You're going to have the craziest governor laying on the track, stopping every damn train you got. You'll not have another lump of coal, not another service at all coming through my state. I'm going to shut you down. He said, oh, we can't do that. And I said, no, we can. I know we can. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do, Joe. I'll give you 1 year to help me sell the Greenbrier. And I said, fine. I looked at my lottery commissioner, John Musgrave. I said, hey, John, we have 1 year to sell this thing. And if we don't sell it, you understand we've got to take it over. And if we do, we'll have the fanciest damn lottery office in the whole world. I said, John, we got to sell it. So I called Donald Trump. I called J.W. Marriott. I called everybody. And when I called Donald Trump, I didn't know him, but I heard about him a lot. And I said, Mr. Trump, this is Joe Manchin. I'm the governor of West Virginia. He says, oh, I know. You're a conservative Democrat. You're just like me, conservative Democrat. That was our conversation. And I said, yes, sir, I am. He says, well, I said, you know about the Greenbrier? He said, yes, I do. And I said, Mr. Trump, I said, you know, it's for sale, and we'd love for you to come look at it. He said, Joe, is it in bankruptcy? I said, no. He said, well, call me when it is, but thanks for calling. So that was my introduction to okay, now 2016, fast forward. He gets elected. Someone sent me how to have a bipartisan cabinet. So he's thinking, he calls me up and says, come up to New York, I want to talk to you. And they're talking about being Secretary of Energy and this type. So I go up there and go up into the pedestal, go clear up to the top of his office, and his chair's it's higher.
Right.
It really is on the pedestal. So he's up here and you're sitting down there. And then Reince Priebus there and a lot of his political, Bob, you know all these people. And so he was asking, we were talking back and forth, and I could tell he wasn't, he didn't understand the political process of how this works and how it was going to work in the White House. And he just basically said, he said, now, Joe, he says, I'd like for you to be in my cabinet, and we want to talk about this. And I said, Mr. President, let me say this. If you want me to be in your cabinet, we're talking about a position. I'd like to know what you want that job to, what's your purpose? What do you want done? You tell me what you want done. Let me put a team together, and I'll accomplish that. Or I'll tell you I can't do it, one of the two. As soon as I said that, let me put my team together, Reince Priebus says, oh, wait a minute, Joe. We're going to have to sit down and talk about this. Now, I knew what was going on because I've been around there long enough. And I laughed. I told President Trump, I said, Mr. President, let me tell you, you're my president. You've won. I'm going to stay in the Senate. I want you to succeed, and I'll speak truth to power, but I'll be very respectful. We'll get along just fine. I said, I shouldn't be in your cabinet, because I could tell when a president gets elected, his top people will basically put their people in every part of government. in every agency, and they control that agency because it's all controlled out of the White House. That's on both sides. That's just the way it's done. So 2016, 2017, he's called me over and we're having, come over lunch, come watch a movie, boom, boom, boom. And we get along fine. And he's completely a different person when you're with him in the social than you see on television. Completely different game. And so 2018 comes. Now, my state's an R40 state. He beat Hillary Clinton by 41 points in 2016. Okay, 40 or 41. Something was awful. Anyway, he says, hey, Joe, they want me to come campaign against you, but I'm not going to because you're my buddy. He says, I like you. I said, well, I like you too, Mr. President. We work pretty well together and we're honest with each other. He says, okay. I said, well, thank you. That's very nice. I said, that's not going to last 10 minutes. When I walked out the door, I said, no, because as soon as Mitch McConnell says, do you understand that he won, that Mr. President, you won his state by 40 points. You flipped the state to completely being an absolute 80% solid red Republican state. Minnie Mouse has an R by her name, should be Joe Manchin. Okay? And he was right. That's exactly. No one's ever won in an R40 state or a D40 state when it's so red or so blue. So he comes to my state 6 times. They spend $25 million extra trying to defeat me in my little state. I win. In the book, there's a picture in the book. There'll be a picture in that book that basically shows me walking into the Oval Office. He's sitting in his desk like this, laughing like crazy. Ivanka and Mike Pence, his vice president, are standing there. And he kept saying, they're all laughing. He said, I told you couldn't beat him. I told you couldn't be beat. It was almost like it was their fault. And he said, I told you couldn't be beaten. I said, oh, really? I'm thinking, what do I say to that, Bob? I said, well, hell, it wasn't for lack of trying. He says, oh, Joe, you know I didn't want to defeat you. You're my friend. I says, oh, I know you weren't serious, Mr. President. If you were serious, you'd have came 12 times and spent $50 million. Now, fast forward. I voted to impeach him twice. First of all, I'm going to say the first impeachment should have never happened. They should have never. The votes aren't terrible. It's different in the trial. But once you take an oath and you see the evidence and what the charges are, you got to vote the evidence. If not, then you can't be a jurist. So I voted to impeach him twice, and then things got a little chilly after that. We still had a little bit, not much after that. Fast forward to this past election. He calls me one day, and about 3 or 4 months before the November election. Hey, Joe, I really want you to be for me. I want you to come out, whatever you want. So we're talking about it. I said, Mr. President, I don't want another political job. I don't want another paycheck from the government. But I says, it looks as if you're going to win, the way I'm saying it right now. And I says, I want you to succeed again. If you do, I'll be there to speak truth to power and be helpful as I can. And he said, well, Joe, we're always buddies. We've been buddies all the time. He says, you only made 2 bad votes. I said, you only made 6 bad trips. He started laughing. I said, maybe we're even now, okay? Left it like that. But it's just, guys, let me tell you, the only thing personal in your life is your family and the closest people to you. Other than that, it's going to come and go. It goes in times.
Okay, I want to get in some substantive questions here quickly before we turn it over to the audience. I found it really intriguing in the book when you wrote about inviting Barack Obama to visit West Virginia.
I did.
Before the primary in 2008, even though you had endorsed Hillary Clinton.
No, I didn't. But they knew I was a Clinton person. They knew I was that was a Clinton person.
He never came. He lost both that primary and the general election. You call it the moment the foundation cracked. Why would you cite that as the defining?
Well, let me just say this, that Barack Obama, I knew Barack Obama when he was a state senator and U.S. senator before he ran for president, okay? And he knew the coal industry and the coal mentality and the culture that goes with it, because in Illinois they have a big coal basin. And a lot of West Virginians worked there, went back and forth. So I thought we had a lot in common. And then, but this is in 2008, he's running, and it comes down to him and Hillary. Now, mind you, West Virginia has not been in play. They weren't prominent in any other primary except 1960. It happened to be John Kennedy made that because we're the least diverse state in the nation to this day. Maybe 3% Catholics, 3% African Americans. Mostly it's just white Protestants. Okay, so anyway, so John Kennedy came and he hadn't done undid the religious barrier. One cute story about that. My mom and I were watching television one night. We had a little black and white, and it was had to be Walter Cronkite. And I'm sitting there with Mom, and we're watching it, and it says, Walter Cronkite says, "It's been said that if John Kennedy becomes president, the Pope will run the country." And I told my mom, I said, "Well, they don't know the Catholics we know, Mom." Anyway, fast forward to Barack Obama, and my family, and the Manchin family, the night before the election, whether it's a primary, general, whatever, the night before the election, we have a big rally, and we invite everybody. My opponent, the person who's been beaten the living crap, we invite everybody and let them all speak, because the election's over. If you haven't won it by now, you're not going to win it, okay? And you're not going to lose it there either. But it gives you time to start mending a little bit. We've been fighting this thing out for a year or 6 months, whatever campaign you've been in. I said, this has always been a time to bring him back. So, sure enough, I'm governor. Bill Clinton's calling me, and Bill's a friend of mine, and he keeps calling me. He said, "Joe, got to have you endorse Hillary. Got to have you." I says, "Mr. President, please, please, please. I'm not going to put my thumb on the scale here in West Virginia." I says, "This is the first time our state's never been in play. Let us enjoy this a little bit, please." I says, "You know Hillary's going to win. I think she's 25 points ahead." Now, mind you, this is Bill Clinton. He's just telling me how much he needs me to be endorsing Hillary now because they need me. And when I said, "You really don't, she's 25%, 25 points ahead," he said, "Is that all?" Now think about that. He knew what the polls were, but they never quit. So I said, "No, I'm not going to endorse her, but we're going to have a rally, and I want Hillary to be there." I called Hillary. She says, "Joe, I'll be there." Well, it became so big, and the crowd was so big, we had to take it to Fairmont State University. I've been calling Barack Obama. Couldn't get an answer back. And so finally, Barack calls me, and he says, "Joe." I said, "Barack," I said, "Come, please come. It'll be wonderful, great for you, great for the state." He said, "Let's face it, Joe, my demographics don't work well in your state." I said, "Barack, my demographics don't work well in my state." And I said, "But if people know you, and he's charming as heck." I said, "They'll get to know you. It'll be different. Just come." But he wouldn't come. So right then I said, "Man, you can't be writing off different states because you don't think you fit. You fit everywhere. You don't fit. Only time you don't fit is when you don't want to fit. Don't blame it on somebody else that make you think you don't fit. It's because you don't want to fit." And I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go. But we had a good rally that night. But that's how it happened. And then from there, our relationship was a little bit chilly.
Yeah. And the state continued to move towards the Republican Party.
2010, okay, let me give you this.
I was going to ask you about 2010.
2010, Bob Byrd dies, June 2010. I'm in my second term as governor, and I've got 2 more years left. I love being governor. I couldn't wait to get up in the morning and didn't want to go to bed at night. I could help someone every day. And then people said, what was your best day? And I said, well, I've had so many good ones. I can tell you one day I felt probably as good as any. I'm going through my security was taking me. We went through a McDonald's and wanted to get a coffee. And it was early one morning, and a lady was there, and she looked out. "Are you the governor?" And I said, "Yeah, honey, I am." She said, "Mr. Governor, I need help." I said, "What do you need, honey?" She says, "I need some teeth." She says, if I don't get my teeth fixed, I can't get a good job. I said, "Honey, today's your lucky day." I called Richard, my dentist. I said, "Richard, today's not your lucky day. I'm going to send this little lady to you, and you're going to fix her teeth for free because it'll make you feel good and change your life. Changing my life." Anyway, those are the kind of things. So I could do that. But now it comes up to where 2010 comes, and he says, "Hey," and Heather, my daughter Heather's really into it. That's the one you need to be talking about, how this political system really works. She dove into it. But anyway, she said, "Dad, Bob Byrd died 9 days outside of the window in our Constitution, state Constitution. That means they had to have an election. And I knew the Republicans were going to challenge us. I didn't want to run. Because I loved the job so much, but I knew I had an obligation because the person that did want to run, I knew he comes from a real high-end family. They own steel mills and all this. I said, that's not good. That's not who West Virginia is. So I just couldn't let that happen. I thought, here I am. Yeah, I thought all about me. I want to keep him from being in there. But I just Didn't think he'd represent the state. So I started, my heart wasn't in it. If your heart's not in it, don't run it. If you don't feel it in your bones that you want to do something that's the right job, don't do it. Now, 3 weeks before the campaign, before the election, now here I am. I think at that time when I was governor, my approval rating in my state was 70 or 72 points. Okay, 72%, which is high. But we just had a good relationship with everybody. And then when Bob, the day I said I was going to run for the U.S. Senate, I lost 15 to almost 20 points of popularity or support in 1 week. Now, why? How can that happen? I hadn't done anything. Still the same person. Nothing at all. Except in West Virginia, your governor is personal. The senator in Congress, Washington owns them. They said, oh, there goes Joe.
And you have a D after your name.
Had a D after my name, and there goes Joe. He's going to Washington.
And you made a famous commercial.
So what happened 3 weeks before the campaign, we all have internal polls. You all hear a lot of polls. Trust me, the candidates know where they are. We all know. We're cross-checking everything. I'm 1 point ahead. Now, I've been a governor for 6 years. I've been a Secretary of State for 4 years. So I've been around. Everybody knew me. I'm only 1 point ahead with 3 weeks to go. I'll lose this race. I knew I was going to lose the race. And then something kicked in. So I'm walking around and I'm thinking, well, we're on the mountain. They're trying to find a commercial and trying to write something that clicked. I said, I'm going to walk around the woods. I'll take my gun out with me. I might shoot something. Who knows? So I'm walking around the woods and just trying to kicking things around. And I come out of the woods and I have my gun. They said, we got an idea. You're not a friend. You're not a supporter of cap and trade. Let me tell you about cap and trade real quick. Why I wasn't. Cap and trade basically says whatever amount of carbon's in that table that you made right there, there's going to be a tax, a carbon tax. You would think that the money that came from that tax would fix the climate problem and give us more technology, innovation, so we cut down the carbon emission. No, they put it all in their social works. And that's what France and that's what England has done. They've had carbon taxes forever. And I said, whenever you want to put it in basically curing the problem, I'll be for it. When you don't do it, I won't. Left it like that. So anyway, they said, let's shoot the cap and trade bill. I said, okay. They called the White House. And they said, Manchin's going to make a spot here, an advertisement for his campaign, and he's going to shoot the cap and trade. And they said, please don't have Barack Obama's picture on the paper. And I said, I would never do that. That's so sacred. I would never, ever. But I said, they said, we're going. I said, fine, you do what you got to do, but you don't have the president involved in this. So I said, okay. So I shot it with a shotgun, and it kind of just blew it to smithereens, but it didn't have the kill effect. They said, try it with your rifle. So I had my rifle there too. And the rifle was, the ad was called Dead Aim. And it was a kill shot. I mean, it just threw right through it. My points went 10 points in 1 week. I went from 1 point ahead to 11 points ahead in 1 week. Why? Why do you think? You know why? That's still West Virginia Joe. We still have him. He's not going to be Washington. He'll be with us. It's just the perception, guys. That's all it is.
We're going to have to turn this over in a minute.
Yeah.
But West Virginia Joe, also after the Newtown shooting, sponsored with Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania.
I had to recruit him.
Tough.
I recruited him.
Tough gun background check bill. You wrote the Inflation Reduction Act, which you say should have been called the Energy Act.
It should have been called the Energy Security Act.
Right.
That was my mistake.
Now, both of those things, if you think about it, most people would say they don't fit in West Virginia. How'd that happen?
Let me tell you how it happened. I was in New York, and I was going to go on Morning Joe on Monday morning. I'll never forget this. Friday, this horrific massacre happens, and these 20 little 6, 7-year-old babies are just destroyed. Just awful. It went through me. I said, I couldn't even imagine. My God, Lord, send your child or your grandchild to school. Might even drop them off at school, and something like that would happen. So my staff calls, you can't go on Monday. Don't go there. They're going to be asking you questions. I come from a gun culture state, and I've always kidded this, and I mean this in the most lighthearted way. I says, in West Virginia, the gun culture is so strong that if you come to West Virginia and don't have a gun, we'll give you one. That's the culture we're in, okay? But there's gun sense. We're taught at a very young age the do's and don'ts of guns, how to carry them, when you load them, when you don't load them. Basically, you don't loan your gun to a family member, so you're responsible. You never sell your gun to a stranger. Just to wait. And everyone has background checks. So I said, no, I'm not going to steer away from that. I'm going to go to that. Interview. Well, sure enough, Joe Scarborough. He said, Joe, what about? I said, well, the only thing I can tell you, Joe, is I've never been hunting with an AR-15. I have friends that might own them, and they like their sports shooting and this and that. But I've never hunted with one, and I don't know anybody that does. Bambi doesn't have a chance after about the second shot anyway, so I don't know why I need 15 or 20 rounds. So this, we talked about that. This doesn't make sense. Well, then I go back to Washington, and they start talking, Democrats start about banning everything. I'm going to tell you, it's one thing for me to tell you, set rules of how you're going to use something, but another thing for me to tell you, you can't have it. Well, who are you to tell me I can't have it? Why? I'll give you a perfect example. One of the senators came up to me and said, Joe, we've just got to ban this gun and this gun, that ban all these guns. And I said, I looked at my senator, my friend, and I said, why don't we just ban your car? What? I said, we'll just ban your car. It has 140 on the speedometer. Hell, that's illegal. Okay, just ban the car. I said, you can buy the car because you can buy whatever you want. People who come from gun areas want the same. They want to buy the products they want. I said, the 1934, you ought to do this, 1934 Gun Act. Remember in the Tommy guns, you see the movies, the mafia killing, they're all killing, the gangsters are killing each other with these big round Tommy guns. You can still buy a Tommy gun. Never had a mass murder Tommy gun. But I'll tell you one thing, you go through a heck of a rigmarole to buy one. You got to show cause. You got to be able to show that you're psychic and also your ability to do it, and you're going to pay a fee for it. So I said, rather start banning things that shouldn't be on the street in everybody's hand or being plentiful, put restrictions on what's your criteria that you should own them. Okay? No different than flying an airplane. You got to have a license. Driving a car, got to have a license. Well, I'm going to give you AR-15. Don't you think you got to have proper training in that or things of that sort? It would stop a lot of that. Anyway, that's what happened. So I came back, and they said, well, you come from a gun culture, write the bill. So I said, yeah. I said, well, you're not going to take things away, but everyone should have a background check. I just went back to how I was raised. I wrote the bill and everything. I got Pat Toomey to come on board with me. It was a Manchin-Toomey bill. My state went nuts because the NRA and everybody came out against me. I was a lifetime member of the NRA. But when I was an NRA member, when I was governor, I started an Eddie Eagle program because I knew the culture I came from. If there wasn't somebody in a household or someone that could teach a young child how to use a gun, if the parents signed off, we would have professionals come in after school and teach you the gun sense of handling and owning a gun. Okay? But the parents had to sign off. So I was all for all that stuff. The NRA, then it was the Gun Owners of America that came after the NRA saying they were working with me trying to do a bill. And they went nuts. And then the NRA went nuts against me and everybody. I said, oh, God. My state was against, everybody was against. I had to go home. I went to every gun store in West Virginia, and I explained to them. I said, this is not a threat to your business. This protects your business. You're doing it the legal way. You're making background checks with every gun you sell. But so-and-so over here goes to a gun show. They can have 500 guns on the table, pay $250 to rent the table for one day. And people are taking guns out in sacks. I said, that's got to stop. Well, everyone says, well, why would you do that to yourself? I said, because I knew this culture. Why wouldn't I? Who else was going to do it if I didn't? And next of all, they said, well, it's going to hurt you back home. I says, this is not a lifetime job. And next of all, I said, I can explain it. I just have to go work it. People don't want to go back home and face you all and tell them what they did. It's too much work to go around and say, I did this for this reason. So I said, if I couldn't explain it, I couldn't vote for it. I could explain what I did there, and I wanted to explain it. So that gives me the ability to do some of the tough things I've had to do because I knew what it took to survive.
And you got reelected.
And I got reelected.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah. Listen, I have to leave some time for signing books. So I'm not going to ask you about what you call Joe Biden and his Irish.
Joe.
I think that refers to his temper.
Joe has a temper, but I have a little bit of it. But he brought this one out in me. It's in the book, gang, about when he jumped on me and said something, and I said, "Oh, wait a minute, Mister." I'm thinking to myself, "Okay, big boy, you want to go head to head on this one? We'll do it," and we did.
And I won't ask you about the decision not to run as an independent because we don't have time. Instead, I'm going to first question to Joe and Sue White.
Let me just thank them. You have the book because of them, and they made that available to you all, and I appreciate so much. Thank you very much.
My question concerns getting into the weeds a little bit.
Sure.
And the major fiscal issues that the country faces include Medicaid, Obamacare, Social Security, and climate change, the attempts to do that. And for example, there are four states that all charge more than 30 cents a kilowatt for electricity, which is twice the national average. It's Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, and this state, all of whom have supermajorities in their state legislatures and Democratic governors. And all four of those issues are things that have approached dogma and don't easily yield to solutions. So what would your solutions be to solving these problems?
Well, first of all, you cannot eliminate your way to a cleaner environment. You can innovate it. You can't eliminate it. Think about the world now. 90% of all pollution is going to come from one continent, Asia. Next 10 years, I mean, that's where it's coming from. We've done our fair share of polluting, building this great country. So what's the trade-off? What's the lifestyle? What's the quality of life? What's the, what do we do for innovation, technology, things of this sort? But the thing about climate, and I've told people on energy, I know the energy we need today. Gang, there's not enough energy to do what everybody wants to do. This whole AI revolution coming and the data centers it's taking, and the grid cannot handle what's out there now. We're not. They were going to call, in California, you were going to close Diablo, the nuclear station. They're looking now to extend it another 30, 40, 50 years probably. They have to have it. So let's look. So when I did I wrote $400 billion of the IRA. $400 billion of a $600 billion bill was all about energy. I knew that we had to produce the energy that we needed today, but we definitely had to invest in energy we wanted for tomorrow because we didn't have the battery storage. We didn't have nuclear doing what it can. We don't have small modular reactors or micros. We didn't have geothermal developed in our country the way it has been in Iceland, different places. We were looking at everything technology has been what we call commercially proven. That means under commercial load for 1 year, it'll provide what needs to be provided. You can count on it. But what happens is, let's take a good one there, is the hydrogen. Hydrogen's been around forever. If you're going to replace gas or replace oil and refinery and gasoline, you got to have something that has horsepower. The only thing I could see had horsepower is hydrogen. It can run trains, planes, and everything in between. But it never could compete with the inexpensive oil and natural gas, and gasoline that we produce through the refineries. Just couldn't compete. You wouldn't buy it. But we're using first generation electrolyzers. Okay? We need to mature it. So I made sure when we wrote the bill, I wanted every technology that was proven, but not yet matured. And we would give incentives to mature these, to get second generation, third generation, get the cost down, more competitive, more abundance. That's what we were trying to do. But in the meantime, we were producing more gas and oil, and we were using cleaner technologies. And that's what we wanted to do. And I've said this on all that you're hearing all about the tariffs and everything. Tariffs should be used two ways in a country. Countries rich as ours. First of all, you have to protect your building blocks. What does it take day in and day out to run your country, defend your country, and keep your economy alive and your people basically in a job market, if you will? So we found out that we need these chips. We need critical minerals, the chips. We let all that go to China. We need enriched uranium. We buy all that from Russia. You have 4 countries of concern in the world that we've always, since I've been there in Washington, it's been beat into my head. You've got Russia, China, you've got Iran, and you've got North Korea that is never going to have our values. It's okay you can still work with them. You can be civil with them. Just don't be dependent upon them. And the supply chain will never be there when you need it. Russia pulled the plug on energy. China's going to pull the plug, and they have already, on critical minerals. And we could be left in the lurk. So I said, that's how you're terrorists. Now, on energy, if we develop ways to burn coal, natural gas, use oil, with new technology that does it cleaner and better than anywhere in the world, then you use the strength of your economy to say, okay, you're going to have an entree into our market, the biggest market in the world that you can sell into, but you're going to have to use this new technology as you energize your country. India is a perfect example. By God, they need more energy than that can be provided right now, and we should be helping them, working with that. And I looked very pragmatic at the energy industry, and I understand it fairly well, that we can do it, but we can't do it if we keep fighting ourselves. You can't just say, okay, we don't need renewables now. We need everything. We need anything and everything. We have a battery company in West Virginia that's able to make 1,000, they can do 1,000 megawatts for 100 hours. They can back up a power plant. That's unbelievable. We're getting to that. New technologies now. Things that we can do we've never done before. But right now, where the Biden administration and I ran into a problem is they were trying to push out things, especially the EVs on the cars, all these credits. We were trying to wean ourselves off of it. I had to tell General Motors and Ford Motor Company. They came to me. I wouldn't give them. I said, I'm not going to give you 75 cents credit. They said, what? I said, I don't remember Henry Ford. Basically, that the federal government was sending people checks to buy Henry Ford cars. I don't remember us building gas stations back when when the assembly line and all the products came out. I said, I'm not going to do it unless we get something for it. So we gave them $3,750 credit if they sourced the rare earth minerals. That means the minerals in the ground somewhere in the world, but basically in North America or in countries we had free trade agreement. So we'd have reliable supply chain. They couldn't shut us down. I did that. The $3,750, the other, which made a total of $7,500, had to be produced in America. And we did that with 40% the first year, 50, 60, 70, 80. The Biden administration cut me in half immediately. As soon as I signed the bill, they went to 20%. I said, we're still going to be dependent on China. So we had a tug of war, and I tried to sue them, but they said I couldn't sue them because I wasn't damaged as a U.S. Senator, so I asked other people. To sue so I could help them slow them down. Anyway, and now the Trump administration has taken a lot of those credits away, which is not good either. We have to have that incentive. If we don't have the incentives, I guarantee you, you're going to go where you get your best return. The company you work for, or your family works for, or you invest into, wherever the best return is where you're going to put your money. And it won't be to where there's no incentives. This is where government has to be your partner until we get you up to a point where you're matured enough to take care of yourself.
Unless we stop, we're not going to have time for the book signing. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to thank the Schwarzenegger Institute, the Whites, and most of all, you don't have to agree with Joe Manchin to understand that he is a force of nature politically. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me say one thing to all of you before you leave. I hope the hardest thing I've got now is recruiting people to get involved in public service. When I was young, I was just enamored with it. Okay, it's the noblest of all professions. And in you all have a better angel in you, and it's pushing you different ways. If there's something in you that you want to give back, there's not a better place to do it than get involved in public service. Either run yourself, get in a movement, get involved with someone who wants you believe in, good person. And that's it, because we're having a hard time. Character means everything. You give me somebody that has character, and I can basically help that person be the best they possibly can be. I can't, when a person doesn't have a better angel I can talk to, I'm in trouble. And right now, the country needs better angels, and from a president on down. Calm this down, gang. Calm it down. It's just, we have to love each other and get along.
And we have to line up if you want books signed.